Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 343. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, regular cast of characters, Gail from Communities Digital News and NY Fights, Daniel from the Inspiring for Boxing News. What's going on, lady and gent?
Good to be back on our original night. Let's go.
Yeah, for those who are not watching Monday Night Football and the Steelers and the Bears and want to listen to some live boxing talk, here we are, Pound for Pound Boxing Report. For those who are new to the show, it's a podcast, YouTube show, blog slash website discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns boxing, concerns the sweet science, it will get talked about. If you want to find out any and all information, uh, blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.com. And repeat that, p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you will find, if you navigate the site, top portion of the site, you'll find links to where to find us all over social media, be it YouTube, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, IG, Tumblr. If you want to email us, you can do so at p4pboxingreport, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. Also on the page, navigate the page, you can find links to where to find us all over the podcast realm. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, any and everywhere else in between. If you want to donate, Cash Me and PayPal donation link. I'm holding back on the coaching right now in terms of Beachbody on Demand, but I still urge those to take advantage of Beachbody on Demand. If you're looking for any kind of fitness program as we get ready to head into the holiday season, or if you want to take advantage of the 2-week free trial on Beachbody on Demand. For 2 weeks, they offer free access to all available programs on BOD, be it the classic P90X series, be it the Morning Meltdown, be it Bar Blend, 6 weeks of the work, the Insanity Asylum, um, the boxing based program, 10 rounds. I would strongly suggest you take advantage of that. While you take advantage of that, get 2 weeks, 2 weeks of free workouts in. So yeah, you can do that on Beachbody on Demand. Let's get things going. Because we were off last week, will probably go back into a fight from a couple of weeks ago, but let's get things going by discussing the main fight that took place this past weekend, and that was undisputed honors at 168 pounds. Um, you had BC, BO, BA, 168-pound champion Canelo Alvarez fighting IBF super middleweight champion Caleb Plant. They fought in Las Vegas. Now go to you, Gail. Ladies first, as always. Appreciate it, Olaf. Appreciate it, Olaf. Thanks for joining us. Olaf from live YouTube chat. Canelo, he's had a habit lately of starting slow, and he did it in this fight. Plant got off to a decent start, a decent job of boxing, right? But and it can be argued he won a few of the early rounds, but you could tell, Gail, that Canelo was just biding his time. You knew that he would eventually warm up, and he did that in the middle rounds. Um, Started to throw more and more shots. And in the 11th, he caught him with a left hook that put him down. A follow up combination put him down and for a second time and out. Canelo becoming undisputed champion. A lot of people, ourselves included, felt that Canelo was the favorite coming in. Canelo was predicting knockout, and the fight went pretty much the way that most people predicted. He's undisputed. The question is, yes, he has all four belts now. First Mexican fighter to become an undisputed world champion. First fighter to become undisputed super middleweight champion. But how much does this prove in terms of this? Does this What does this say about Canelo, the fighter? And the reason I ask that, because in the aftermath, people are talking about him as an ATG fighter. Is he the greatest Mexican fighter of all time? Does that prove? Does this fight uh, justify that talk?
No one fight proves out about any fighter. No one fight. You add to a body of work. Does this add to an impressive body of work? Of course it does. Absolutely it does. Caleb Plant credit. He's mighty tough. He hung in there a lot longer than I thought, looking at the shots he was taking. He stayed in. He gave himself every opportunity, despite the fact that his particular skill set didn't demand the respect from Canelo that he needed because he just doesn't have enough power. And what a shame. He did land shots on Canelo. He did have success with the jab in particular, but you could tell after Canelo ate a few of those shots, he thought, this guy does not have anything that will push me back. And that's when you saw from the third, fourth round on, and especially back half of the fight, which is now a very common pattern with Canelo. He works his way in, he studies, you hear the phrase downloads the data. He observes, he tests, he sees what you've got. And when he decides that he can take care of business, he takes care of business. There are very few fighters currently active who can simply decide to pull the trigger against top competition when they feel like it. And he's one of them. He's just one of them. So when he decided he was going to take out Plant, he took him out. This also should be a chapter in a book about the old water in the basement, building up your body shots, landing those body shots. No one shot doubled Plant over. No one shot was like one of those taser landed shots that a guy just falls over. But one after another, they build up and they weaken somebody and they take your legs out from under you. And once that happened, Canelo swooped in, boom, beginning of the 11th round, game over. We're literally, it's like seeing an old school video game with the screen that says game over on it. That's what we all saw. How anyone to that point could have scored the fight even close for Plant, somebody would have to give me a very strong explanation. Very strong. My cards were exactly the same as the Steves. Steve Farhood, Steve Weisfeld. We both had it 98-92 at this time of the stoppage. Of course, the knockdowns weren't scored because that round wasn't completed. Plant didn't land anything near as harmful. He didn't deploy the strategy. He was the guy reacting to the person directing the business in the ring, and that was Canelo. But again, I'm going to end this by saying he impressed me more than I thought he would. He did everything he could. He had to know that he was up against far more power than him, that winning on the cards, would be tough. It turned out not to be that difficult to score. But you always worry when you're in the other guy's turf, are the judges going to be fair to me? He gave it everything he had. I didn't feel like he folded or mentally gave up at any point during the fight. And Canelo complimented him at the end of the fight, and rightfully so. It takes two guys to make a really good, fun-to-watch fight, and Plant was part of that.
Also want to give a shout out to Mitch and Abraham. Abraham said compliment to you, Gail, in the chat.
I know. Woo!
And Olaf said, and I'll put up his comments again. He said he actually had Plant up 6-4 at the time of the stoppage. Canelo gave away most of the early rounds, and I think that it was round 9. I think it was round 9.
I gave Plant round 1 and round 9.
Yeah, my problem is, Olaf, and I respect your opinion. I'll go to you on this one, Daniel. While he did reasonably well early, my issue was, and I was chatting it up with the guys from the fellas from Three Kings. Please check out Three Kings Boxing, your source for boxing information, for pure unadulterated boxing information. Shout out to the folks over there at 2K, the head of 3KB, Bo, who you heard on the show here numerous times, head of media relations, head writer Bakari, fellow senior writer Jarrell, aka Big Cool, as well as myself. Um, I was chatting it up with them privately once I got home and was able to see the fight coming home from work. To your point, Olaf, Plant did reasonably well in the early part, 1 through 4. My issue was is that he let Canelo have the center of the ring, Daniel. Uh, Too often he veered to the ropes when he didn't need to. His best shot winning the fight was getting the jab going, taking advantage of his reach and his quicker feet, not going back to the ropes, but fighting in a tight circle. And I didn't like how at times he was too defensive, right? You can you can be careful with your approach without giving up the distance in the way that he did. And it made it to the point to Gail's earlier point. Canelo was so comfortable in there. Plus, when Plant hit him, he didn't hurt him. Uh, uh, Canelo didn't have to exert much effort, right? And he was so comfortable in there, Daniel, that he wasn't even sitting down between rounds, right? And you could just
Mm-hmm.
sense that Plant was so defensive through a large chunk of this fight. He didn't offer really true resistance. That once Canelo really amped up the pressure, you knew the fight was going to be over and over whenever he put the pedal to the metal.
Exactly. One of the things that I think a lot of confusion happens when it comes to scoring fights is the fact that if you're not overly aggressive, you're not seen as winning the round. Which is why I can see how Olaf came up with the scorecard that he did. But it plays both ways. The other party has to be aggressive too. Now, Caleb Plant did execute a pretty decent game plan as far as being very defensive, as far as trying to make Canelo miss. And there has been some shots where Canelo missed on some rights. But one of the things that Caleb Plant does rely on is frustrating his opponent to the point where they get off their game plan so then he can start countering and then his offense. Unfortunately for him, Canelo's like one of the calmest fighters in the sport. He doesn't get frustrated. You really have to piss him off during the fight in order for him to even slightly deviate from the game plan. And even at that point, he just turns it on sooner than what you think. And it's exactly the situation what happened. In fact, on Twitter, there was this little exchange that somebody posted in during the ninth round where both fighters were complimenting each other during the round. But there's also the fact that Caleb Plant didn't really probably frustrate Canelo or made him exert that much energy because, like you mentioned, he did not sit down between rounds. The last time you saw Canelo do that was against Chavez Jr. And Chavez Jr. offered no resistance to Canelo in that fight. So it was a good plan by Canelo. Once he saw that Caleb Plant was starting to slow down, he stepped on the gas. And the uppercut, it is the exact same uppercut that he broke Billy Joe Saunders over the bone that landed and scored the knockdown. It's a beautiful shot, beautifully timed. You can debate whether or not right afterwards whether Caleb Plant going to the rope should have counted as a knockdown. Watching it in slow motion, you might say yes, but then looking at the time, you can see Canelo may have missed on a punch and Caleb Plant just jumped too far into the ropes. But then afterwards, that trade right that ultimately ended the fight. That was timing. That was preparedness. That was a calm fighter that knew who he needed to be and how to finish it. And it is not anything to take away from Caleb Plant. He fought well. He showed that despite a lot of criticism, he is world caliber level. But he's not Canelo world caliber level. Few fighters are. So it's a good fight all around. Love the technicality of it. Love the history that Canelo made. And now we have to see what's going on to the next.
And let's talk about that now. in terms of what next. In the interview after the fight in the ring, as well as post fight interview, when when the question was posed to Alvarez, he was kind of mum on the issue. However, that hasn't stopped speculation from pundits and fans in terms of what's his next move. He could stay at 68 and defend that unified belt, right? You got Benavidez, who's fighting soon. You got Charlo, you got Golovkin, you got Andrade at 160, who would love the opportunity to move up in weight to fight him, right? Then you got the crop of light heavyweights, most notably Bivol and Butaev. I'll go back to you, Gail, and you can follow up, Daniel. If you was Canelo with all the options there at 68 or 75, would you get at least one defense of the unified belt, or are your eyes moving? Are your eyes looking up to light heavyweight?
It's a good question. It depends. I also think, in part, who Canelo wants to work with as a promoter. He's a free agent. He's essentially promoting himself, kind of the Mayweather model, but he does need a promotional partner. Well, he's now danced with DAZN. He's danced with Matchroom Boxing. He's danced with Premier Boxing Champions. He's been on DAZN and Showtime and Fox pay-per-view and, DAZN pay-per-view. He's now had a little taste of the promoter buffet. So there are good choices for him with all of them. So that might factor in. The other question is, does he want to have a big homecoming fight in Mexico? Does he want a showcase fight before he tackles another challenge? He seems still, after 16 years at this, since he was 15, and he's not quite 31 years old, which is amazing. What's most interesting to him? He's a gym rat. He loves to work hard. What's he going to work hard toward exactly? Is he going to defend the belts? Doesn't really need to. He can certainly go up to light heavyweight. He's got Beterbiev there. He's got Bivol there. He's also got somebody like a Joe Smith Jr. there. I think the least dangerous to him personally is probably, and I'm going to change my mind just as I'm saying this. I think the trickiest fight for him, the one that would most likely end up in a loss, people are going to be surprised to hear me say this, is Dimitri Bivol. Because Bivol is disciplined enough to do all the things that Plant did well, but not get hit and not engage. And he does have enough power to keep Canelo off him if necessary. I think Bivol would be a very frustrating opponent. Bivol has the skills that we, in flashes, still saw from a very aging, before our eyes, Sergey Kovalev. Kovalev was ahead on a lot of people's cards, legit, at the time he got knocked out. I don't think Bivol would make the same mistakes, and he doesn't gas like Kovalev did. The question is, Bivol can take that fight at either 168 or 175. I think he'd be pretty smart to drop down to 168. If he doesn't have to give up his belt at light heavyweight, then it's almost a free pass for him. Beterbiev, he's got enough power to be scary. I'm not sure he has enough skill. I think Canelo could take him out, but he'd have to be very careful. Joe Smith, he's kind of a wild card. He could either be a world of hurt or not that much of a challenge. If Canelo wanted some kind of a homecoming fight, then he takes that fight in Mexico and maybe he fights somebody like Jaime Munguia, depending on what Munguia looks like this weekend. And the other guy floating around out there who's sort of a toss-up is Zurdo Ramirez. I think that's a great matchup for him. That's not super challenging, an all Mexican on Mexican fight. Zurdo's undefeated. Canelo has amazingly good options in front of him. It's he holds all the cards. He gets the say. He's in complete control of what happens. So I think he'll head on home. He's going to play a hell of a lot of golf. He might be a 2 or 3 handicap golfer by the time he decides when his next fight is. And don't be surprised, anybody, if he retires in 5 years and decides to go on the PGA Tour. I wouldn't put it past him. I really wouldn't.
While Canelo didn't disclose specifically what he's going to do next, Daniel, he did say he would make the decision in January. I'll pose the same question to you that I did to Gail. Should he stay at 68 and defend an undisputed championship, or should he venture up to 175?
It's always been like a ticket of mine whenever you've seen a fighter get to this point of being undisputed where they don't defend it. And I hope, like in this case, for Canelo, he does defend it at 168. And at that weight class, as a fighter that's strictly in that weight class, the only credible challenger at that weight class is Benavidez. Because he presents challenges in height, he presents challenges in reach, he presents challenges in activity. Now, unfortunately, with Benavidez, the biggest enemy is himself in a lot of things. I know we're going to talk a little later on it, but if you pull a scenario where he has to go to light heavyweight, probably the fighter that would probably give him the biggest challenge when it comes to power would be Beterbiev, but Beterbiev's power could probably not last long considering his body's been breaking down a lot in unfortunately, his career. It's a good thing he has that law degree. But Bibble, as far as overall, always has presented the biggest skill challenge. He's as disciplined as Canelo. He can be a good ring general like Canelo. And ultimately, he might frustrate Canelo enough where he may able to win the fight. However, there unfortunately lies the big criticism that I always have of Bivol, which is if he doesn't see that he can knock you out by the third round, he just decides to outbox you. And Canelo is different from other fighters where he can do the same thing, but he has that extra gear that makes him want to knock you out. And that would be different enough where that can lead to Bivol losing. It's open. We won't know until who's fighting until May, because I know he said decide in January, but he said already that he's probably only going to fight in May, and that's going to be a tough schedule to go on if he wants to fight 4 times next year. So it's open all around, and it's open from a promoter standpoint too. He is truly an actual free agent. The fact that Gail mentioned Jaime Munguia, who is co-promoted by Golden Boy, can tell you how open it is. That's as bitter as that divorce was between Canelo and Golden Boy. There's a legitimate chance that you can see both of those two breaking bread again. So it's pretty much an open menu.
I'm good with either from Canelo. If he wants to move up to 75, that's fine with me, particularly if he can land the fight against the likes of a Bivol or Beterbiev. If he wants to stay at 68, I'm good with that as well. I would like to see him fight a Benavidez at 68. I know I am in the minority here. I'd still like to see him fight Andrade. I know Andrade, he's a love or hate kind of personality, but he can fight. And if Saunders could give him Canelo some trouble until he got some difficulty, until he got caught with that shot and had his face broken, I think that Andrade could similarly give him some trouble as well. based on this comparing the boxing skills between him and Billy Joe. Um, Charlo, who knows what Charlo's going to do? Because he's doing a lot of talking, but that doesn't mean he's making the moves to put himself in a position to fight a Canelo. And of course, a lot of people are still clamoring for a third fight between Alvarez and Triple G. Personally, I don't. Yeah, it's a fight. I understand the push for it. I understand why people want it. I just don't want to see it. I've seen their previous two fights. The third fight will go to a similar way. Uh, um, I just think that Canelo will be more dominant in the third fight. Triple G is getting older. He hasn't looked great recently. And say what you want about Canelo and this new style, but he's fighting smarter as he's getting older, right? And I just think he'll beat Triple G more decisively in a trilogy. Let's move on to Alvarez. Plant took place on the 6th. Let's move to a fight that took place the night before, Daniel, and that was a unification bout at 130 pounds for the ladies, as WBO junior lightweight champion Mikaela Mayer fought IBF 130-pound champion Maiva Hamadouche. Outstanding fight. Hamadouche, she brought thunder early, was in Mayer's face. It can be argued that she won 3 of the first 4 rounds, but Mayer began to adjust in the middle rounds. She was able to get some distance and really tee off with combinations to the head and body, left hook to the body, right hand to the head. She began to get the jab going, but Hamadouche continued to be on her like bad breath throughout the fight. Mayer won, but the thing that still has me heated, as well as a lot of people on boxing Twitter after the fight, and even those commentating for ESPN Plus, was how wide she won by. One judge had it 90, 98, 92. Another had it 99, 91, and and the other one 100 to 90. If you want to say, Daniel, that Mayer won, I can agree. But no way did she win by that wide of a margin. It's like Hamadouche, she didn't have a chance. They didn't give her a chance. She's been a champion, for a world champion, since 2016. Where was the respect, not only for what she's done, but how she fought? I'm pissed off at that more than anything else. That was some BS.
Oh, BS would be the tip of the iceberg to the comparison, especially when you watch the fight live. What's probably most distasteful about this is the fact that if you show somebody just the scorecards, they're not going to want to see the fight, because if you see those type of scorecards, you're thinking it's domination, it's a wash, and instead you wind up missing out on what is probably right now a late runner for Women's Fight of the Year, because Hamadouche came in guns blazing. She did not let Mikaela get into rhythm within the next 4 rounds. And you can argue, that Mayer may have won 1 round. You can also argue that Hamadouche may have won all 4 rounds. But she came in, she landed shots. You could tell Mayer felt those shots. And it took her longer than normal to adjust. And even after she started adjusting, she started going to the body, landing body head combinations. Hamadouche still kept coming. Maybe not as effectively as in the first 4 rounds, but she still kept coming. And you had to give her that respect. This woman had the second highest KO ratio in the women's division, behind Amanda Serrano. And we know how Amanda Serrano is when it comes to wanting to knock people out. And Hamadouche was fighting like she knew that she wasn't going to win a decision. And based on those scorecards, there was no way. Those scorecards were filled out before the fight even started. And not only that, the referee in round 9 was probably Hamadouche's best round in the second half of the fight, between round 9 and round 10, he told her, "Hey, show me something, or I'm going to stop the fight." I did not see any point in the fight where you could say that Hamadouche was being hurt badly, where you would start thinking about stopping the fight. So that at the top of the cheesecake, and comes from that factor, it just leaves a bitter taste in people's mouth when it comes to this, because Mayer is a good fighter. She can adjust, she can use her height, she can use her reach, and she does have a dynamic personality, and she can box fairly well. And unfortunately, this is like this, and going to leave a bad taste in people's mouth, especially when she's at the realm where she can challenge an Amanda Serrano or a Katie Taylor. And not to mention, as far as I know, I think they're still going to go forward with this World Boxing Super Series for women at 130 pounds. She has two the belts now. So we have to see how it shapes up. There's no way the Top Rank is going to try to give Hamadouche a rematch, because Hamadouche may actually come in with more bad intentions, and if anything, the first 4 rounds can be judged by may or may not survive that one. But may actually adjust fairly well, and it may look a little bit better. It could look at a situation similar to Katie Taylor when she fought Pursoon the second time. So really, really good fight. Like I said, late runner for Women's Fight of the Year. Just don't go by the scorecard.
Gail, conspiracy and robbery are and controversy are 3 words that are quick to be used by fans in particular when they feel some kind of way about a decision. Um, Sometimes it's fair to use it, sometimes it's not. In this case, all three of those words could apply, because again, um, this fight could have gone either way. I'm not mad that Mayer got the decision, but at most the judges gave Hamadouche 2 rounds. 2 rounds. That's ridiculous. And to Daniel's point, it's like they had the scorecards written before the bell even rung.
It was an insult. Whether the outcome would have been any different with fairer scoring, or what we perceive as fairer scoring, it might not have changed anything. I thought Hamadouche certainly earned herself at least a draw, the way I was looking at it. But forever, people who didn't see the fight, who aren't going to remember it in years to come, are going to look up the record and see this virtually a shutout for Mayer on the scorecards. And, that's just an insult. And it's not only an insult to Hamadouche for her effort, it's an insult to Mayer and how hard she had to fight. If she earned the victory, and you can make a case for a victory, not by those cards, but a win, it denigrates her effort too, and how hard she had to work to get it. So those scorecards don't serve anyone. And that's why so many people try not to leave it in the hands of the judges. Hell, even Canelo tries not to leave it in the hands of judges that are generally predisposed to him. Eddie Hearn was furious. He took to boxing Twitter and had it out. Credit to Top Rank. They did distribute this scorecard so we could all take a look and scratch our heads and wonder what the hell we were looking at. I hope someone else gives Hamadouche a good fight and a good payday. The one good thing, if there's anything about this, the boxing world on Friday night and yesterday and Saturday and tonight on this show are talking about women's boxing with some real passion behind it. You know, I'm not mad at that part. I'm not mad at the debate that has sprung up, the genuine excitement over this fight. It really, in the end, while not good for either of the women involved, wasn't horrible for women's boxing because it was a damn good fight. Hamadouche deserves another fight, and now people in North America and other places in the world who weren't familiar with her before, oh, they know her now. She's got a lot in common with the one woman who beat her before Meyer, and that's Delphine Persoon. And interesting, they're both police officers full time. Neither of them train full time. You know, someone give Hamadouche enough money to get into the gym 6-7 days a week instead of having to pound the pavement in a uniform, and let's see what she could do. Come on, Eddie Hearn, do it.
If all things were fair, they would run this back in a rematch first quarter spring 2022. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. Um, Hamadou said after the fight, "Let's fight again in France." Ain't no way Aaron's going to let that happen. It'll, to your point, Gail, it'll be interesting what Hearn decides to do, what he can do for Hamadouche coming forward, because she fought too well. She was too valiant, too much of a warrior. Showed and proved that why she was a champion and why she was a champion for so long. It'll be a shame if her name would be just left out in the wilderness while Mayer moves on and fights a Terri Harper, for instance, who we're going to talk about in terms of previewing upcoming fights, or fights a Choi, who's also a world champion at 130, or moves on and up to possibly at 135. Hamadouche is owed more based on this fight. Let's hope that she gets it and she's just not forgotten and just looked at as an afterthought, because the way the judges did her during that fight, that was cold. That was cold, and it was outright wrong. She deserves better, a lot better than that bullshit in terms of the judging this last Friday. Let's move on to one more fight. If anybody wants to get into it, I'll leave the floor to y'all. And as a unification bout that took place during our week off, Chantelle Cameron fighting Mary McGee, unification bout at 130 pounds, 40 pounds, excuse me, won by Cameron, beat McGee by decision. I unfortunately wasn't able to see all of this fight, so I'm gonna lean on you guys, on you, Gail and Daniel, heavily. Give us a quick recap on the fight and what's in terms of the future for Cameron.
It was a good fight. It was entertaining. Mary McGee is an American fighter. She, unfortunately, she's a former title holder as well, so she didn't completely come out of nowhere. She was 27-3 before the fight, lost to Cameron. The big issue with McGee was not her skills, was the fact that she only had one fight in the last almost 2 years and was rusty. That I think was her big problem. The scores were very lopsided toward Cameron. It's not a robbery. Yeah, it's certainly not in the way the Meyer Hamadouche fight was. But McGee was in the fight. She gave her best effort. She did make Cameron work for the win, despite the fact that the cards were, I think 190 and 2 cards with 99s. So, yeah, she didn't embarrass herself. But Cameron appears to definitely be the real deal in this division. Women's boxing in the UK is coming on with a lot of stars there who are making names, making fans, making money. It's all good. So Cameron's got a lot of options in front of her.
Quick word on this, Daniel. Do you want to move on?
I unfortunately did miss the fight too, so I didn't have a chance to fully look at it.
Okay. Couple more. I'm gonna combo this. Jamal James fought during our time off. Fought a guy by the name of Butaev. Was stopped surprisingly on that same card. Boots Ennis fought Thomas Dulorme. Stopped him in a round. I go to you, Daniel. Any quick word on any of those fights, particularly Boots Ennis, who's now saying in 2022 he wants the biggest and the best at 147.
Yeah, a little bit primer on both. You kind of feel bad when it came for Jamal James. He had a very close fight against Sugas, but it was understandable. He was just getting beat too much inside for him to last a little bit longer, and he fought well, but it just wasn't enough. And as far as Boots, good knockout. It is a name opponent in Dulorme, but I will say this: before he landed that shot that knocked out Dulorme, Dulorme also did land a pretty clean flush right-handed Boots. And I know people were rushing to judgment right afterwards, but if Vergil Ortiz, Errol Spence, or Terrence Crawford landed that shot against Boots Ennis, Boots Ennis may be going night-night. So it was a great knockout. More than likely, him and Vergil are going to pine for title shots next year, but there are some holes that need to be plugged.
Let's move on to some news here, and I'm going to piggyback off the what you just said about Boots. If that was Vergil Ortiz hitting him, I'm going to flip the news segment here from what I sent you guys in the docket. Let's begin the docket talking about one Vergil Ortiz during the mayor Hamadouche card. Normally I don't call out reporters, but I have to in this instance because yeah, it caused a lot of discussion on boxing Twitter, particularly from us fellow pundits, right? Mike Coppinger of ESPN reported that Ortiz is leaving Robert Garcia. I put Diaz. I'll fix that in the post show. Robert Garcia, and he's going to be trained. And he's in his reporting, he said he's going to be trained by Reynoso. Well, Ortiz saw that report and went off on Twitter, tagged um, Coppinger, and disclosed a conversation, a private conversation that took place between the two. I'll go to you, Gail. The bottom line is what Coppinger reported wasn't exactly what happened. He asked him, is he leaving? Is he being trained by Reynoso? Ortiz said no and said basically don't want to discuss it anymore. Coppinger took that and ran with it and said he's leaving him. He's leaving Garcia for Reynoso. It caused a lot of stir. Some were trying to defend him wrongly, defend Coppinger wrongly, in my opinion. But most was like Coppinger, yeah, you misled here. You took a private conversation public, and you didn't have all your facts straight. The bottom line is Ortiz is leaving Robert Garcia. Don't know if he's going to be with Reynoso, but more to the point, Gail, this whole thing brings up the point of credibility in terms of rules, code when it comes to reporters. Speak on that quite while you can, please.
You know,
as well.
I'm going to speak about this with a disclaimer. I hate that we're giving it any airtime. It's much ado about nothing at this point. It wasn't a private conversation. It was straight out there on Twitter for all to see. Coppinger asks, or Vergil, hey, I heard you're now training with Eddie Reynoso. Is that true? That's a yes or no question. Number one, if you've been trained how to do journalism properly, you don't ask a question where the answer is yes or no. Okay? But it's a lazy thing. A lot of people do. He asked him, are you training with Eddie Reynoso? He says, no. Honestly, that should have been the end of the discussion.
Right.
What he heard otherwise, we don't know. He has never explained it. He went off on another tangent. Now, Ortiz then sees this and says to him, hey, I said I wasn't training with Reynoso. The problem was Coppinger didn't ask a follow-up question. He didn't explore it any further. Why? I don't know. Maybe it was Saturday while the Canelo card was in progress. He might have gotten distracted working on something else. He's got other obligations, so he didn't ask a follow-up question. But he printed what he printed, so clearly he heard something. He heard something out of the Garcia camp, is my guess. That's a very big gym. And it turns out Vergil and his father, Vergil Sr., decided, due to a decision that Garcia made, to provide he had a I'm going to back up. Sorry for the stop and start of the sentences. It turned out that the origin of all this is that Robert Garcia had to decide whether he was going to be in the corner of Joshua Franco or Vergil Jr. because they were both teed up for fights on the same night. Garcia made the decision that Franco needed him in the corner worse than Vergil, that Vergil Sr. was perfectly capable of seeing Vergil Jr. through the fight in the corner. The Ortizes weren't happy about that. They wanted Garcia with them. That's an honest difference of opinion that led them to believe, maybe he's just too busy. I've often thought that with a lot of top trainers. They've just got a lot of guys in their stable. How much time and attention can they give to 2 or 3 dozen guys, right? It happens. And that is a real common reason for fighters leaving trainers, that they want more time and attention. So they go somewhere else. So apparently that had been discussed. You cannot tell me that of all the people in that gym and the extended Garcia family, that chatter wasn't out there. I guarantee you that chatter was out there in Southern California somewhere. So who knows where Coppinger heard this or what version of it he heard, but he didn't verify it with the sources involved. He jumps to conclusions. He's got part of it right, part of it wrong. Robert Garcia sees all this stuff going on while the boxing world is all looking at Twitter because they're all watching the Canelo card, and that's where people hang out and chat, is boxing Twitter. And he decides to put up a video on his Instagram feed saying, hey, here's the deal. And he tells his side of the story that, yeah, that's correct. Vergil's moving on. It's not like they had a big fight, blowout, difference of opinion. Nothing went wrong. Particularly just the Ortizes think they need somebody else that wants to give them more time and attention. But they have not confirmed who he's going to. Who knows if down the road they're going to patch it up with Robert. Maybe not. But the boxing Twitterverse got very upset about this half-assed pull-it-back reporting because it's confusing. I will say this. Coppinger isn't the only one. The entire sports journalism industry, the entire YouTube media industry, and I don't always call that journalism, and the entire news gathering industry as a whole is so concerned about being first, they're less concerned about getting it right. They just want to be out there. And the fact is, everybody loves to say, ooh, breaking news from Mike Coppinger at ESPN. Breaking news. Well, nobody reminds him or holds him to account when he gets it wrong. So where's the downside for him? None. Because the prize is getting it right, and getting it right more times than you get it wrong. And when that happens, people are going to continue to report rumors before they become facts. I would venture to say all the YouTube channels do it. Everybody speculates. A lot of that stuff on YouTube are opinion talk shows. It's not reporting. It's chatter. It's very hard for the average fan to figure out which is which. There is such a blur. So that's where we are. It's kind of water under the bridge at this point on Monday. It's hard to look back on Saturday and see how upset everyone got over it. But there we are.
Here's the problem, and two-part before I go to Daniel. One, he puts this stuff out and leaves it out there. Could have been in what he said was sloppy in doing it, and it all happens while he's being prominently featured on a card, right? People are sitting there watching their boxing hardcore heads, especially watching Mayer and Hamadouche, and they see his mug up there talking about this story and that story and this story and that issue, while this is being left out there causing confusion for everybody, right? That's one. Two, and I'll bring up a comment from here from Mitch, put it up here in public. Yes, he's you a lot of people do it, but when you in his position of prominence, you can't do it. And his not the first time he does it. And Mitch brings it out here. He says that Cop has made double mistakes recently. He and Pugmire jumped the gun on Teofimo and Cambosis when it came to the Triller card. And he's right about that. He reported something that wasn't turned out not to be true, left it out there. And then when he got called out on it, he was forced to take it back. And he'll throw stuff out there, or when people puts or when he's not first, he'll have a way of sideways dissing others reporting. I know about this from personal experience, right? Um, I don't know if I want to disclose it, but let's just say I know about it from personal experience. Talking with the homie 2K about something I reported for Three Kings, and I beat him to a story, and he kind of side tweeted indirectly, suggesting that what we did was kind of wrong. It wasn't accurate, and we worked. And I talked to the homie 2K behind it and proved all the evidence and whatnot. So he did it, yeah, but it couldn't be refuted what I reported because we had all our ducks covered. That's the issue that I and many others have with him. Um, when you've been guilty of this on numerous times, you cannot make this kind of mistake, Daniel. Nor can you kind of dispute others when they beat you to a story. That's the main problem with him, and why that's the main problem with him in general. And in terms of Ortiz, all he had to do was just say that Vergil Ortiz is moving on from Garcia, and did some backdrop in terms of why he's leaving and detailed it like Gail did, it wouldn't have been a problem. He didn't have to uh, assume and gun jump and cause all this hubbub.
No, he didn't. But like mentioned, like I said, a good audience mentioned it. This is the second time in 2 months, technically, that he's done this. Now, if I remember the timeline correctly, Gail did point it out, but if I remember the timeline correctly, Carpenter asked Vergil about the situation. Vergil answered. And somewhere along the lines, I think it was before the article was published, Vergil put the DM out on social media saying pretty much, if it doesn't come from my management team, don't believe it. And then soon afterwards, Carpenter just has a story published anyway.
Right.
And you had the usual clowning, Dan Rayfield joining that. The meme of Carpenter and how walk about his shoes, and then you see Ronald McDonald's shoes has now become the standard norm. But of saving his case again, which happened again also in the Triller situation, saving his case again from being completely wrong, is the fact that Robert did come out and say, yeah, Vergil left my camp. Here's the situation. We left amicably. Wasn't no bitter feelings. And it let him save face on that front. Here's the problem with it, though. And this is one of the things I do agree with Gail when it comes to what sports journalism has become, because unfortunately, sports journalism is what a lot of other journalism, particularly politics and current politics, has become, which is you just got to score whose side is the best, who gets into who's first in, who's the best. And one thing that you notice it, and you notice it a lot when it comes into other news, particularly things like the NFL, the NBA, Major League, the transaction tends to be more popular than the actual action. And what I mean is like firings, trades, free agency, things like that. What's behind the scenes tends to be more popular than the actual fights in many ways. And this is a situation happening here now, taking all of that bullshit away. This is honestly probably a good move for Vergil because Robert Garcia is one of the best trainers in the country. He's one of the best trainers in the world. But he is also a trainer that has been criticized before for focusing too much on offense and not enough on defense.
Yeah.
And if you remember, that's the main criticism that people have when it comes to Vergil. He does great offensively. He's a good offensive fighter. He knows he has power. But there are lapses in defense.
And he did get hurt. He did get hit and wobbled a bit in his last fight.
Yep, against Mean Machine, yes. And maybe it would have changed a little bit different if Robert was there instead of a Joshua Franco fight, but Joshua Franco was defending a title, technically, I think, or fighting for a world title. Vergil was not. There's a priority there. But I understand where Ortiz is coming from. Vergil's one of the emerging top talents in the sport. He and Boots Ennis likely will fight at least a unification bout within the next 2 or 3 years. So there's going to be priorities that are going to be pushed into it. And if you need to work on defense, yeah, maybe it's a good move to move away from Robert. And there's a lot of other good coaches in that area. If you want to stay in the California area, that will do fairly well. You can go to a Joe Gooston. You can go to a Joel Diaz. Now, since you already have the offensive input, you can even go to a Vergil Hunter. There are options available. And honestly, it's a good thing to look because, yeah, he can go back to Robert. We've seen fighters go back to their previous trainers in a little bit, but this just is the whole mess of how it got reported is what leads to people's bad taste in the mouth. And unfortunately for Coppinger, it is also prime for the courts for the place that he works on, ESPN. Because ESPN, unfortunately, is the place that where they want to be first. They want to be first at everything. If people don't remember, 11 years ago, a reporter in Newsday, which is the newspaper of the main newspaper on Long Island, broke the story of LeBron James joining the Miami Heat to join Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh the night before the decision. Alan Hahn is the reporter that did that. But right afterwards, almost in the morning, Chris Broussard had to put out sources saying he's going to the Heat because they did not want to be scooped on it. And ESPN prides themselves in trying to be first because they're the quote-unquote worldwide leader of sports. But unfortunately, a lot of what ESPN has done is what's hopefully a lot of what's going wrong in sports journalism today.
You're right. You don't want to have to go into this in detail, and you really don't want to have to call folks out in this way. But sometimes it can't be avoided because this was just so sloppily put out there. The more I am in this writing space, and I'm on. I write for a online publication in which I and other writers there are get pounded constantly. Accuracy, accuracy, accuracy. Even if you're not first, make sure you got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. I know it's the same way for you, Gail, and for you, Daniel. I've said this before, but we are often in private conversations with fellow pundits, and believe you me, most of the stuff that we get there, all of it, basically, it doesn't come out, and it doesn't come out for a reason. If folks don't want it if folks don't want it out there, we respect their wishes and like, okay, what goes on here stays here, right? If we look up something, put it out publicly, we try to reach all of our sources, available sources, double and triple check, and then we go out there with it. Then we go out there with it. And to have one of our quote unquote colleagues not always do that, but yet still get in prominent positions and get so much attention, for lack of a better word, it's disappointing. It's disappointing and it's infuriating on a personal level, given how, let's just say, he may be able to get with it, but I couldn't, you couldn't, Gail, you couldn't, Daniel, and still keep our integrity in a certain aspect. Let's move on from this mess, right? And move on to some boxing stuff specific. A lot of talk about Devin Haney during our week off. Uh, Chatter between him and Jojo Diaz. Uh, Haney's was looking for an opponent on December 5th. Diaz said, "Yeah, I'm here. I'm ready to fight." Blah blah blah. In this case, Gail, what started as Twitter beef turned into an actual fight, right? Devin Haney, Jojo Diaz going to fight in December. Uh, no matter how this stuff popped up, at the end of the day, given the styles, this on paper, this looks to be a fairly entertaining scrap. I'm looking forward to it.
I love it. I love that these guys are going to lay it down and go for it. It's a good fight for both. It's a challenge in different ways for both. They've got their constituents, that are going to get behind them. Great way to end the year for both of them with this fight. I, in particular, have really been impressed with Joseph Diaz Jr. being willing to take a risk. Part of it is you have a big loss, and at that point, it's sort of a what the hell, what have I got to lose beyond that attitude. It makes a fighter better. It makes them more willing to risk, to bet on themselves. And when they do come back, the confidence they had before they took the loss, it drops, but then it rebounds like crazy. It's almost like watching some stocks these days. They're way up, they dive, and then boom, everybody buys back in, and zoom, it's back up there. Well, Jojo Diaz's stock's pretty high right now. He has absolutely had his ups and downs, but that is where a lot of learning occurs. Yeah, a lot of these guys are by far the better for it. We're still struggling against the romantic notion around the undefeated record. It's not been the best thing for boxing. This is in part why there are so many fans going over to the UFC for their combat sports, because it doesn't matter as much there, and the matchups they really want to see do get made. So credit to both these guys going for it. It's a good test for Haney. It's ambitious of Diaz. Haney has to be considered the A side at this point, but there is not as much difference between them as anyone would like to think. And that's nothing but good for boxing.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Haney defending his WBC belt against Jojo Diaz, who, by the way, is the interim WBC champion. Uh, I like it for both men. I want to see it.
Oh, yeah. It's about time the lightweight division, all this talk about people fighting each other, actually some of it gets done. And this is to me, a very, very interesting fight. because of how both of these guys can approach. Obviously, Haney is coming off a fight where he really, if Jorge Linares just would not have, if he wouldn't have held as much as he did in the 12th round, there's a good chance Jorge Linares is the WBC lightweight champion right now. And for Jojo Diaz, you have a situation where it's another place where you're the underdog and you're now on the precipice of a world title shot. The first time at featherweight, if he would have turned it on just a little bit more in the middle rounds, he probably would have beaten Gary Rosa Jr. But he didn't do it. And then the second time, late replacement, seems similar situation here. Late replacement, because he had to find a replacement for fighters. 130 pound IBF, fighting Tevin Farmer, wound up beating Tevin Farmer, but unfortunately lost that belt on the scales, I think. So Jojo has this on and off record when it comes into these opportunities, but this is something that he's wanted. Obviously, the fight he was supposed to have was him and Ryan Garcia, but Ryan Garcia got hand surgery. And doing that, he actually got upgraded to this fight. And this is going to be an interesting fight for both men because Haney, skills-wise, you can say on paper, it should be an easy fight for him if you just see it on paper. However, that Linares fight showed that he can be hurt, and he can be hurt late. And with Diaz, he's a fighter that he's not going to knock you out, but he's going to beat you in a war of attrition if he has a chance. And that's a situation that Haney may land himself in. And with Jojo, you just got to make sure you keep yourself disciplined. Nothing crazy happens. And you show up in the ring ready to defend yourself because we know who everybody's going to be gunning for. It doesn't matter who wins. We know who they're gunning for after this. So get yourself in that sweepstakes whatever ways you can. And for Haney, it's just a confirmation of his greatness. And for Jojo, it's an affirmation of his place in the division.
Quick word here. I want to stick on something. You mentioned that Diaz was supposed to fight Ryan Garcia. Quick comment on this, please. And this goes back to a discussion we had about Canelo. I want to try to connect it to Canelo Alvarez. Canelo was asked about Garcia, right? And didn't pull any punches. He basically said that Garcia is not dedicated. He's not a dedicated fighter anymore. He's questioned his level of commitment in the gym. He essentially charged King Rai of being more focused on outside of the ring stuff and social media and being getting spotlight outside the ring rather than putting in the work in the gym. Now he knew he's out. Now Garcia is out of action right now due to surgery that you just mentioned, Daniel. But quickly, whoever wants to talk about it, your thoughts on what Canelo had to say about Ryan Garcia?
It had to be said. It had to be said, and it had to come from a place of authority. And what better place than pretty much the leader of your camp when it comes to Canelo? And you can talk about something similar, like they both have influences. They both can do things with social media, but you also have to remember that Canelo has literally spent half his life as a professional fighter. Ryan has not. And Ryan has grown up in the age of Instagram, in the age of TikTok. And he himself has stated that he does not want to stay long in the boxing. I think he said that he wanted to retire at 26. He's 23 now. So they may show a lot of focus, and I can understand the reasoning why. Like, there's always the story of the fighters that stay too long and they don't come out right. But there's also fighters that retire, could be mid late 30s, and they've come out pretty well. Tim Bradley's one of them. Outside of personal political opinions, Paolo Malignaggi is one of them too. So there is an avenue where you don't have to worry about it for so long going into it, and it's good for Canelo to say it because it says that you got the attention of the main guy on the table. You have his attention, and if you want to stay in that camp, you better do what he says.
Any quick word, Gail, about Canelo putting his young protege on blast like that?
I don't make much of it. He made a comment about him. I wouldn't call it on blast. I think he's eager to see him back in there, encouraging him. A little shot across the bow. Again, I think people, because of Canelo's stature in the sport, they listen so carefully to every single word he says, especially now that he is communicating so much more in English. We hear it firsthand, right? In a way we didn't before. And Canelo's personality in English, is a little more off the cuff and a little more reckless than it was when he kept himself just to Spanish. And
AKA he cusses more.
cussing Canelo. I call the current version of Canelo cussing Canelo. And I love it. He's sort of in the position now. He finally is relaxing a little bit, letting his guard down. Before his statements were very scripted, very careful. He never colored outside the lines. Now he's telling guys like Andrade and Usman off, and the comment about when he learned that Kamaru Usman had made a comment about, yeah, when I win this week and when Canelo wins this week, yeah, we'll have a fight. It'll be great. Canelo's comment is payday, payday, payday. Hilarious. And he's right. That's the stuff I'm enjoying a lot, watching Canelo enjoy himself. He's finally allowing himself to enjoy the rewards that have come with 16 years of hard work. Sure, he takes a couple of months off in between, but not much, and not like a lot of other guys in his position, who lay off between fights, let themselves, bust out through the scales. He does not do that. So he'll be in a fine position to retire here in 3, 4, 5 years when he runs through the opponents that interest him or are available to him, assuming they all stay healthy and stay in the sport. So, yeah, he fires off a little zinger at Ryan Garcia. I'm not sure he thought all that much about it or meant that much about it. But again, it's Canelo. So everything he says becomes reading the coffee grounds in the bottom of the cup or reading the tea leaves.
Shout out to Lee Groves, who we all know. He says in recent years, Alvarez has assumed the mantle of pound for pound king, not only in deed, but also in word. In 2 languages to boot, his actions carry weight, and hopefully Garcia will follow his lead. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. About Alvarez. He's a lot of people consider him pound for pound the best fighter in the world. He's the most visible fighter in the world, one of the highest paid, and he's conducting himself in that matter. He's not just essentially he's more than a fighter, and he carries himself as that in that way. He carries himself as an ambassador for the sport at large, and specifically in his little localized camp out of his training facility in San Diego, I believe, where it is in your home area, Gail. So yeah, to Daniel's point, it was needed. Canelo felt he had to say it, and let's hope that Ryan is listening fully, and he takes word to what Canelo says, and he acts appropriately in response. One more story here before we move on to some fights here and preview some fights. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split these up because I want to get this. The goal is to get this show done in around 90 minutes, right? Serious story that took place outside of the ring that had an impact on a fight that was supposed to happen is as Rolly Romero, who was set to fight Tank Davis December 5th. He pulled out of that fight after 3 women, I believe, came out publicly and accused him of sexual assault. Rolly has denied these accusations, quoting him from an interview he did with TMZ Sports. He said, although the allegations against me are totally false and I will prove them through the legal system, I agree that it is in the best interest of everyone involved that I not participate in the upcoming pay-per-view event. After clearing my name, I will return to the ring as soon as possible. Touchy subject here. Sexual assault allegations. Romero claims that he's adamant that he's innocent. He was going to prove it in the court of law. But the bottom line is the result of all of this is that you're not going to see him fight Tank. Tank is instead going to fight, I believe, Isaac Cruz. Whoever wants to touch on this, your reaction to this development.
Yeah, he's going to fight Isaac Cruz. Not a bad fight, actually. I'm kind of more intrigued by this fight than I am the matchup with Romero. Listen, there are a lot of players in boxing today and over the years who've had their dust-ups with the law and dust-ups with personal violence against women. Gervonta's been seen himself on video grabbing a woman by the neck and manhandling her in a very public way in a basketball arena. Never been charged, never been taken to court civilly over it that we know of. His mentor, one Mr. Floyd Mayweather, was convicted of a crime and did in fact do jail time, conveniently scheduled between fights. So, he whined about the food in prison at the time and was having people, send him money to buy stuff in the commissary or some crazy ass thing. He was in local lockup. He wasn't in a very serious prison. He was in the Clark County jail for a 6-month stay. They're not the first. They're not going to be the last. They operate in a violent sport, and there's no excuse for using their skills in the ring to hurt people or threaten people or bully people outside the ring. I do also understand that it can be very hard to figure out how to flip that switch in your mind, especially if your mind is not super clean. We'll put it that way. So, there have been plenty of people along the way, promoters, managers, fans, media, who've sort of conveniently looked the other way with a lot of these guys. In Romero's case, it was really tough to do that because, as I understand it, although this whole cavalcade was started by one woman, it's my understanding there are as many as 8. That's a little bit hard to explain away. That is not an incident. That is a pattern, and a very troubling one. Yes, he deserves a day in court, if there is to be one, and tell his side of the story. But he doesn't get a big payday fight with that looming over it. It's not good for anyone. It's not good for him. It taints whatever performance he has in the ring, good or bad. It's not good for the network. It's not good for Davis. Again, it becomes the story. So if they made this decision, it was probably for self-serving interests. It was still the right decision. It was still the proper ethical decision. Not that boxing is ever terribly worried about that. And some of us have to make our peace with these things popping up from time to time. But in this case, it served nobody to go forward with Romero with this sort of black cloud looming over everything, this sort of distraction. Should his name be cleared on paper in the court of law, reputation aside, Showtime should then put him back on the roster. They should be easily able to do that. Maybe not against Gervonta, but something with a similar payday and visibility. And Yeah, well, let's face it, he's also not the A side. So he was a touch more expendable. It was really the only possible thing for them to do. And the one hint of applause I'll give everyone concerned, they didn't drag it out. They made the decision quick, boom, done, got another opponent right away, and they're moving forward. I hope this all gets played out uh, in the proper venue, that all parties are heard, and a just conclusion is reached, whatever that might be.
Um, any reaction to this, Daniel?
Gail summed it up pretty well because when I saw it happen, I said, "Yeah, you don't always make the right decisions for the right reasons, and this was the right decision to make, but it was for a very cynical reason. Obviously, if you kept Rolly there, you just open up the avenue for to bring up that incident that Gervonta has, like so, which is more prevalent since we know there's video evidence, and in turn, also the snowball grows. We bring up Floyd's previous transgressions when it comes to domestic violence. So, and at the stage that Floyd is in, where he's trying to introduce Gervonta as a previous star, as somebody that the wider sports audience can get behind, you cannot let those incidents come to surface, even though they will eventually. Eventually, will come through and it will be talked about. But at this point, you cannot do it. And in all actuality, this is the better fight when it comes into it. Cruz was, I think, the runner-up before they decided on Rolly, and Cruz will probably give a more interesting, probably give more of a challenge to Gervonta than Rolly would have. So in a way, yeah, it's all for the cynical reasons, but we probably got a better situation out of it.
Yeah, again, just like the story in terms of it, Vergil Ortiz and Coppinger, I felt they had to be addressed. The same situation with this, as uneasy as the story sounds, it would be irresponsible of us to not at least talk about it in some capacity. So yeah, we decided to give some time here. Let's move on and talk about what's coming up, right? A lot of action here. Like I said, I want to split this up between everybody and have them talk about fights individually. I'll go back to you, Daniel. Um, Matchroom card that's taking place this weekend, headlined by Kid Galahad, finally a world champion at 126 pounds. He defends the IBF title that was vacated by Warrington, making the first title defense against Kiko Martinez. Uh, Look, if this was the Kiko Martinez of 10 years ago, I give him a decent shot. Now, not so much against a Kid Galahad, who I think is going to be one of these fighters who significantly improves now that he has a world title. Look, he fought Josh Warrington a couple of years ago. I thought he deserved the verdict. They gave it to the hometown fighter Warrington. I believe strongly that Galahad, he's going to win this in comfortable fashion here. Maybe even stop him.
Yeah, if this was the Tico Martinez of 2010, he would have a shot. But it's 11 years later. Kiko unfortunately has had a lot of fights under his resume, under his belt, and he's had a lot of wars under his belt. But this is a name. This is something to build up when it comes to Kid Galahad, and this is something to prime him up for unifications. Whether he can get lucky and get that lauded once a year fight with Gary Russell Jr., or because he still holds it for somehow, some way, Leo Santa Cruz. And there may be another challenger too, because on that Canelo undercard, Ray Vargas, after almost a 2 year layoff, I think, looked pretty good in his fight. And it wasn't a situation where he was boring into it. He actually looked really good in his fight. So there's a lot of challenges out there. So you got to put your name out there first. But this this is like after fight after he wins the title, so it is kind of a gimme. I understand Eddie's decision here.
There's also Lee Wood, who won a version of a title as well earlier this year, beating Kanzu. Um, on the undercard of this bout, Gail, you got a women's championship bout. We mentioned Terri Harper briefly while talking about Mikaela Mayer, right? Well, Harper, she defends the WBO 130-pound title against Alycia Baumgardner, who's been talking quite a bit, saying what she's going to do and how she's going to bring the pain over in the UK. Does she have the ability to back up her boast? Does she have the ability to give a Harper a good fight?
So far, nobody's been able to do that. Good for her for wanting to try. Good for her for talking it up. We're talking about her. I think her chances are slim. There's always a chance. I think she'll come out. The best approach for her is to come right at it out of the gate. If she lets Terri Harper get set, get settled, and get to work, she doesn't have a chance in the world. Terri Harper has turned out to be a formidable opponent, a very smart one. She works very hard in the ring. She's hard to beat.
I'll go to you, Daniel, to talk about this next card, this next series of fights, I should say. David Benavidez, who we mentioned briefly again, talking about Canelo as a future opponent for Canelo, fighting late substitute Kyrone Davis. Benavidez was supposed to fight Uzcategui. Unfortunately, Uzcategui tested positive for COVID, so now he's fighting this late substitute. One more comment here before we go on. I didn't see this from Lee. I was distracted, was not focused on this, but Lee says in returns of the Galahad fight, Lee says that Kiko is a tough-minded individual and he'll give his best, but Galahad has high work rate and a tricky, herky-jerky style. It'll be fun to watch, but Galahad will prevail. I agree with that 100%. But anyway, in terms of David Benavidez fighting a Davis, I go to you, Daniel. I don't give Davis much of a shot, particularly if Benavidez is on his A game. He's coming in late, so you don't know how good of a shape he's in. What say you?
But this is like a pretty bad situation when it comes to Benavidez. He was supposed to fight Uzcategui. This was supposed to be a WBC title eliminator for super middleweight. So this would have been the chance to force the issue when it comes to him fighting Canelo. Instead, Uzcategui pops. You put Davis as the replacement, and the fight starting now is just a 10-round fight. Like I say, I feel bad in the sense into it. Now, Davis, his last go around was a pretty tough outing against Anthony Durrell, who himself also won on Saturday. But this is a situation where, it's going to be a replacement. David has been training, barring any, unfortunately, of his own faults, which have been more of the recreational use than performance enhancing. You have to expect him to really show out. He knows this was supposed to be his opportunity, pretty much his audition for Canelo, and he still has to treat it as such. And like I said, when we talked about Canelo, he is pretty much the only legitimate challenger for him at super middleweight. So he still has to show out. I do expect him to do it. I do feel bad about the situation, but you have to do what you have.
Jaime Munguia, former 154-pound champion, and Gabe Rosado fought on the same card in Texas earlier this summer. You could see the seeds were being planted for them to fight. Shortly after they both appeared on the same card on the Zon or on the Golden Boy card, it was announced that these two are going to fight. They're going to face each other in Anaheim. It's going to be aired on the Zone. And of all the fights that we've talked about that's going to happen this coming weekend, Gail, I think that this fight has the chance to be the best, the most fun. Um, I don't. I'm not even going to predict the winner here. I'm just going to say that both fighters are going to be hit as long as, however long this fight lasts. This is going to be entertaining. Um, I'm looking. I'm looking forward to this with just for the sheer violence of it, for the potential violence here. Uh, they can't help. They can't, given the way they fight, they can't help but to produce an exciting one here. That's my only prediction.
I agree. I will be there ringside, and I can't wait. Yeah. Is this going to be a demonstration of boxing at its highest, best craft? Oh,
Nope.
no, no, it is not. But both guys will bring it. Neither of them are going to hold back. They both got something to prove in different ways. Rosado is having this amazing late resurgence of his career. He'd be crazy not to take it out for a spin after his stunning comeback knockout win against Bektemir Melikuziev. Nobody saw that coming. Munguia has a real test here against somebody who's willing to pretty much throw everything he's got at him in the ring. He'll get cut. It'll be bloody. It'll be ugly. The fans will be going nuts. I understand that tickets are selling pretty darn well in Anaheim. You know, it's a little Thanksgiving present for everyone in Southern California. It's a good matchup too. It's good for Munguia's development. It's gonna walk him through some fire. If Rosado wins this fight, you know, who knows what's next for him? But he's riding out his career in a way that none of us expected. And I'm really glad for him. He's always made a tremendous, honest effort. He came razor close to winning in several fights, and I believe he absolutely did beat Daniel Jacobs and got robbed. So this is a bit of a consolation prize for him, and I hope he enjoys every moment of the attention he's getting. There's the natural Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry built into this. Going to be a damn good time. And all of y'all who like the sweet science, I understand that. I like a good technical fight. I like seeing skill. You know you're going to be right there cheering it on.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Another comment for Lee before we begin to shut things down in terms of the Benavidez fight. He says for David Benavidez, it's a homecoming fight for him, and he's fighting on the heels of Alvarez victory. It's a great opportunity to offer a compare and contrast, and he'll take everything out on Davis. I agree with that. He also says that Munguia Rosado will be a slugging match, but while Gabe will be rugged and tough, but the Malakulia KO was only his second fight since September of 2012. I think you may be wrong on. Oh, his KO was only his second KO since September of 2012. Now I get it. Munguia is the genuine hitter here, and he'll win. He may win, Gabe. He may win. Lee, but he's going to get hit, and I predict he's going to get hit a lot in the process. And I know he's being trained by Eric Morales, right, Gail?
Munguia?
Yeah.
Yes, he is training in Tijuana.
Yeah,
El
right.
Terrible. And that's
but yeah, but I still question whether I still think the deficiencies in terms of defense, right? That was his main issue when he was champion at 154 pounds. Yes, he had offensive skills and he could hit, but it didn't take much to land on him as well. He was open for shots when he was champion at 154 pounds. I don't think all of that has been alleviated at 160 with a new trainer, and I think that Rosado, yeah, he may not have quote unquote TNT power, but he punches hard enough, and I think he's good enough of a boxer and has enough experience where he's going to give um, Munguia uh, problems and plenty of it. And again, I think this is going to be a fun fight for however how long it lasts. Going to start to shut things down here. I want to thank everybody who joined. Well, first of all, let me say if you like what you've heard this evening, or if you're checking this out later on YouTube or on the podcast realm, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Google Podcasts, and anywhere and everywhere else between. You know the deal. Um, hit that like button on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure to follow us on the other podcast platforms. Want to thank everybody who joined us in the chat. Uh, be it Lee, be it Mitch, be it I thought I saw Ivan in here as well. Olaf. I want to thank all of them for their comments, and Abraham as well. I'm going to go around the panel here, starting with begin the show with ladies first. Going to end the show with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News, nyfights.com. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk media, because you do teach media on the side, or for those who want to check you out the next time you're on TMZ Live. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Could be any time now, too. You can find my regular column at Communities Digital News. That is COMMDIGI news.com, comdiginews.com. My opinion columns are at nyfights.com. The difference is on NY Fights, I get to swear. Viva Mexico, cabrones!
I'll go to you, Daniel, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk, but the sweet science for those who want to talk wrestling, professional wrestling, or the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Well, folks, you can always find me on Twitter, Rox99, RAWKZ99. And about to post tonight our show that we did last night with Joe Francis. I started covering the fights into it. We're going to do this Thursday or this Sunday coming up when it comes to this fight, because November is the month that's picking it up a lot. And I know the week after next, we're going to have a lot of pretty significant fights coming into it. So, but it's going to be a fun weekend. Munguia Rosado is going to be rocking soccer, man.
Before I give to info on where to find me and follow me and to talk boxing and anything else, I want to give a shout out to a fighter we talked about here on numerous times, Alexander Zayas. I kind of did like a retweet, subtweet, if you will. And the question I asked was in reaction to the fact that Zayas posted video of him in training and him mentioning that he's going to return to the ring on December 11th. The question I asked in the retweet was to boxing fans, is Zayas 2021 prospect of the year? He responded. He says he's not there. He's what did he say? He says the year hasn't ended yet, but I'm still working on it. Shout out to him for commenting. That has as a result of all of that, a healthy conversation from boxing fans has been part of my feed in response to my retweet of varying opinions on Xander Zayas. Most believe that yes, he's earned the distinction of being 2021's prospect of the year. Good, healthy conversation, good, healthy back and forth. So I want to give a special shout out to the young kid, Xander Zayas. It looks like very, very promising welterweight prospect. I believe he's only 19 years old. And yeah, be on the lookout for him. He's made a lot of moves here in 2021. He looks to carry on that success in December and hopefully into 2022. If you want to talk boxing, if you want to talk music, if you want to talk fitness with me, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to talk, if you want to find out all things regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.com. Again, if you want to email us with a question or comment, you can do so, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. Just navigate the blog page. You'll find links to where to follow us all over social media. Our pages on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, IG, Tumblr. Also, links to where you can donate, Cash Me, and PayPal, where you can check out the podcast on regular podcast platforms. Uh, yeah, again, and where you can I'll just say for right now, I'm going to hold off on the coaching. Just too busy right now with some personal matters as well as boxing matters. So I'm gonna hold off on that. I'll get back into it. Um, on the next episode, we will do a recap of David Benavidez and Davis. Um, talk about Munguia Rosado on that Davis undercard. His brother Jose is fighting as well as Rancis Bartholomew. We may touch into that. We'll also do a recap of Galahad and Kiko Martinez as well as Terri Harper in that fight. We didn't talk about it here, but Tim Tszyu is fighting Takeshi Inui. We may talk about that as well. And we will do a preview of Demetrius Andrade. He's returning to the ring to defend his WBO middleweight title against Jason Quigley on the undercard of that. MJ Akhmadaliev, unified WBA IBF champion at 122 pounds. He's defending those belts against Ronnie Rios. On that card as well, Julio Cesar Martinez fighting. Finally, hope they get this fight going against McWilliams Arroyo. Martinez defending his WBC flyweight belt. Callie Reese is fighting Jessica Kamara for the WBA unification bout, really, BA as well as BO women's junior welterweight title. And preview of the big if Canelo and Plant was the big fight this past weekend, we're going to preview the next big fight that's happening in November, and that is Terrence Bud Crawford. His big test at 147 pounds, folks, fighting Sean Porter. A lot of talk about it. So we're going to go full scale detail into that preview of that, and we may also talk about Janabek Alakanuli, promising middleweight southpaw. We may talk about that as well. So it'll be a loaded show next week. So again, I want to thank everybody who joined us in the live YouTube chat. Appreciate your questions and your comments. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and spread the word about the show. So yeah, this has been episode 343 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. I'm your host, Michael. For Gail, for Daniel, we will see you next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night. We'll see you next week, hopefully.